Hi, everybody. It's Melissa Campanelli. Welcome to Women in Retail Talks. I'm the co-founder of the Women in Retail Leadership Circle, and today I'm delighted to be here today speaking with Deb Waterman Johns, who's the co-founder and chief creative officer of Scout, which is a family-owned Washington, D.C.-based brand known for colorful, stylish, and affordable bags designed to help the modern woman or man stay organized and carry all the stuff they need to navigate their busy lives. We're going to speak to her about her career trajectory, what it means to be a creative leader, her philanthropic work, and so much more. So let's get started. How you doing, Deb? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thanks for having me.
So excited. I'm actually a fan of your bag, so I'm so happy to be talking to you.
That's even better. We love it.
So, and I just kind of mentioned a little bit about the company and your products, but maybe I'd love to hear about it in your words. So, what kind of bags do you sell and what makes them unique?
Well, a lot of what we focus on is sort of those multi-levels and layers of a busy woman's life, whether she's a professional and a mom or she's a stay-at-home mom, whatever it is, she's got levels and layers of craziness to control and contain in her life. So we decided to design a line of bags, accessories, coolers, and storage containers that are both fashionable and affordable, lightweight, compactable, and really things that work with your everyday life, and also items that once you use them, you can't help giving them to everybody in your world that you love. So they're great to pass on as well.
Perfect. And was there some white space you saw when you started the company? Had you thought that there might be a need for this kind of product? You hadn't seen it out there, or maybe from your background. Can you kind of walk me through a little bit about the sort of genesis of the company?
Sure. I was in New York City in the fashion world for many years and found myself in Washington, D.C. At that time, the anti-fashion capital of America. No longer, ladies. Thankfully, we are in style these days. But in those days, there wasn't a whole lot of original style in Washington, D.C. And having been in the fashion world, and my husband was in the gift world, I started doing pop-ups in a building on my property for women in Washington who traveled a lot and wanted new, exciting things. And I bought some bags in New York City, commodity polypropylene bags that were not very pretty, but were highly functional. And everybody thought they were fabulous. And then I was on a color board overseas and discovered that a very famous designer had used the same fabric in a very expensive bag. And we knew in the business that trend starts at the top and the bottom and meets in the middle. So we thought, listen, could be a really exciting type of fabric to parlay into bags that work for busy families, busy women, and create something that's prettier, but also keep the high function and high value in that same arena.
So you saw that there was a need for something like that. It hadn't been out there. You were getting great feedback from folks from your pop-up. So that's really cool. So you kind of took it and ran with it.
Exactly.
That's awesome. So our listeners and our members and everyone that knows our audience loves to hear about two topics, risk and resilience. So can you talk a little bit about some risks you've taken in your career that eventually paid off? I mean, it sounds like the start of the company was a risk, but maybe you had something that you wanted to share there, and also how you're able to stay resilient, during a particular difficult time.
Absolutely.
Maybe during the pandemic.
Of course. Yeah, I think the first big risk really was leaving the world of fashion in New York City behind, which was an incredibly exciting place to be in the 80s. As we all know, it was sort of, no limits. I was at Vogue and then I was at trend forecasting firms and very dynamic, and came to Washington, wanted to continue to stay in that world, and really wasn't sure how I was going to do that. And I started actually styling women and their closets. I still have personal styling clients today who I've stayed with for many years. It kind of keeps me in that world of what do women want? What are they looking for? The style quotient. And so from that, it was really born out of my husband deciding, after being in the manufacturing world for so many years and wanting to relocate to DC because he was further south. And we thought, well, why not combine our talents? And so it was a big risk. We started out with a couple of styles in a big, bold check. We showed up at the New York Gift Show and the Atlanta Gift Show with with 4 styles in 5 colors and said, here we are, folks. And it was risky, but it was also so exciting to try something brand new and combine our talents and really get that positive reaction back. And I would say in terms of resiliency, I think in a business of entrepreneurship, every day you have to be able to pivot. You've got to be positive. You've got to look at the glass half full when you do get to situations like the pandemic. And we thought, wow, okay, most of our retail customers are having to close up shop until they have a plan. How are we going to sell in that world of wholesale? And we started working with retailers who were going online a little bit more. We bumped up our online business even more. We started making face masks out of the leftover fabric from some of our bags. And it gave us a window into the world of, the customer whose new normal needed something new from us. So that really gave us something very positive in the wake of something really tough on all of us across the globe.
Great. Yeah, I love those two stories, risk and resilience. They're such important topics, and they're so important to our listeners, and also they're such a major part, I'm sure, of being an entrepreneur. So one of my favorite things to discuss is creative people and leading, because I know it can be difficult for some creative people to be in leadership positions. And I know you're both a creative person and a leader, a business leader. So and I know a lot of our listeners are interested in this too. So can you offer like any tips or best practices around being a leader when you have a creative temperament?
That's a great question. And I would say what's interesting about the world of creativity is I do think that right and left brain coordinate pretty well when we as creatives understand that if we don't coordinate, it's simply not going to get out there. So if we want to get our product out to the world, we need to respect the numbers and pay attention to the numbers and get a framework that is definitely workable. And I would say that from my very early days, a couple of things. Number one, I was able as a young woman, I lived all over the country, landed in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and was able to take free art classes at Carnegie Mellon University. Every Saturday morning, 600 kids in a room, and you could hear a pin drop. And our instructor was an amazing man who actually taught Warhol many years before me. And he told us, he said, listen,
Pittsburgh.
Exactly. There you go. Walensky, I think his name was, or Warholsky. Anyway, he wonderful, wonderful man. And he basically said, just listen, you're creative. But if you don't take that creativity and harness it and understand that you need to create something that will become a business or become something viable. And we heard that from a very young age. So that was something that was planted early, that creativity and business can work together. The other important thing is I played a lot of sports growing up. As a young woman, it was not the norm to probably play as many sports as I did, but my dad treated me like I was his first son. And he was like, look, you know what? Go out there and get involved in sports. And it was something that taught me teammanship. It was something that taught me about mentoring. So younger women who have become a part of our business, we're primarily a female-driven business for female-driven product, which is very exciting. And the brave men that are with us are fabulous. But we really do believe that having been involved in team scenarios, and a funny story, back in New York in my days of forecasting, a girl came in who was a brand new employee, and she said, you must have played on teams. And I said, is it my calf muscles? And she said, no, it's the way you navigate working with other people. And I think that that's something that as women, so many young men are encouraged to play sports, and now there's many more young women learning the value of teammanship. And I find that translates so well into the world of business.
That's so interesting. No one's ever really expressed that so eloquently before, but it is really important for women to do, to get involved in sports, because not only is it great for them psychologically and for, helping them in a lot of ways, but it's also great for helping them learn how to deal with people, deal with different types of people, understand how to, respond to a manager or something. So that is really, really super interesting. And I love the comment. I love that it was something that was in your brain that, business and art can go together from a young age. So those are great. So speaking, you mentioned your dad before, and I know that you are a mom of four, so which is unbelievable in itself. So how were you able to manage it all when you were starting out, and what are some best practices you can share who might be with our audience who might be juggling this right now?
Well, I think the thing that I learned very early on is set the bar low. I had 4 kids in 6 years. I always worked. And I was able to, when I was freelancing, especially, was able to sort of gauge my hours to the activity level that my kids had. So I was very fortunate to have that. I also knew that I could find amazing people to help me. We are close to a lot of universities in Washington, D.C. I always had awesome student teachers, and Georgetown and American University and George Washington. And these young women were incredible with my kids. I mean, let's face it, 4 kids in 6 years is a crazy equation. But, I figured if they went to bed sort of clean, with smiles on their faces, and maybe they have chicken nuggets for the 5th night in a row, don't beat yourself up. I think when we're really looking at the equation, kids are resilient, they're flexible, they just want to be happy and taken care of and be with one another. And so if you create an environment that's fun and dynamic and colorful, then the rest just falls into place. But I think knowing that we can do it all, but we may not be able to do it all by ourselves. So we have to know how to ask for help. And we have to know that asking for help is not weakness. It's actually empowering, because then you can focus on the things that you're really good at. And I'm pretty good at some things, and I'm pretty bad at others. So I think that if we kind of identify what we love to do every day, what we're great at doing as parents and business women, and maybe some of the things that we're not in love with doing, we ask someone else to help us out with those tasks. And like I said, it's been a real gift to our family to have people other than my kids' parents in their lives as strong influences in their development.
So well said. I love it. So true. You shouldn't feel guilty about it. You're doing the right thing by learning how to ask for help.
That's right.
I also know that you're an avid philanthropist who has created 2 charitable organizations. So I'd love for you to talk about those.
Yeah, when I was living in New York and working for Vogue, and it was sort of the era of Studio 54 and no complaints, it was fabulous. But I started to feel like I wasn't doing something to give back. And so I started coaching swimming at a local boys and girls club. And I got so much more back than I could possibly give to these kids. And I also became involved through the fashion group with a program called Santa's Helpers, where letters written to Santa at the post office were opened. And they realized that many of these young children who were writing in, or parents were writing in for them, actually came from areas of need in the city. So those letters would become available to organizations that wanted to answer those letters as if they were Santa. So when I came to New York, from New York to Washington, I called the post office and I said, listen, can I get 25 Santa letters? And I will never forget, the head of public relations, Lavinia Broussard, amazing woman, said, why do you want 25 Christmas letters? And I said, well, I'm going to stand outside my kids' preschool and I'm going to find 25 Santas who can answer as if they were Santa Claus. So over the last, I would say now about 28 years, we have grown the program to handle, just through my friends, through my kids' schools, whoever is willing and able, and many of my friends have done it for the 25 to 28 years, to become Santas during that time. And we've helped thousands of families and children. And Christmas is about kids. So that all feels right. Our office now can't wait to do the whole Santa thing. All the girls go out and shop and we all wrap presents together and then we deliver to the families. So we try to do as many families as we can. We were as high as 350 families one year. And I think Ben was about ready to hand me divorce papers because it was like nothing else was happening at my household. And then we've gone down to about 125. My kids are no longer in school. And so our volunteer base has become a really wonderfully dedicated group. And the other philanthropy that we started was really out of need. My middle son, Bo, developed childhood cancer at 11. Large B-cell lymphoma. And we fortunately were able to walk down the street to Georgetown Hospital, and we could get all of our wonderful neighbors and friends were right there. So we had all the support we needed. And we thought, you know what, let's give Bo some power. So if we ask families to donate on his behalf to a very small fund that was giving money via the social workers to families that were underserved, whose children were in the hospital and maybe they couldn't visit because they didn't have gas money, or they couldn't pay their rent that month because they were taking off a month of work. So we basically started a fund called the Go Bo Fund. And the first year, I think just out of the goodness of our friends and family, letters were written to 1,200 people. And I think we raised $50,000 to $75,000 just to put right into that fund. And over the last 15 years, we've donated about $750,000 to that fund. And during that time, it made Bo feel potent. I said, Bo, every day you're in the hospital, we raise money for kids who don't have it. And that was the critical empowering component to make Bo feel like, even though he was not powerful in the illness, he was powerful to other kids. So those two things have become cornerstones of not only our family, but also really our business, because people embrace it. You know, it's a community kind of a thing. Georgetown Hospital continues to help those children through pediatric oncology. And someone said to me, we do a big fundraising party, and every year there's a theme. We've had the Beverly Hillbillies, we've had Tacky Wedding. So we have about 500 people at this party to raise money. And of course, during COVID, we could not have the party, but out of the generosity of our friends and neighbors, again, we were able to raise nearly what we would have with a party. But those themes have been so much fun. And now we're multi-generational, because all of our kids are adults. And all of my crazy friends who still love a good party, we all come to this party. So there are great messages in this, in that I think you can take something that is very challenging and figure out a way to make it empowering.
Amazing. So inspiring. Oh, what a great story. I'm so glad that you found some kind of light there. That's amazing.
Absolutely.
So finally, I'm excited about this question, because I know, you have such an interesting background. You've been around fashion and Vogue and all that good stuff. So you're a seasoned trend spotter. So our women love to know about trends and what's kind of coming up on the horizon. Obviously, they're in the retail industry. So what are some trends that you're following right now, like in the fashion space? Are there any trends that are related to like the pandemic, or the hope that the pandemic is going to be leaving us at some point, or like I'd love to get just a couple of quickies there.
Well, I love that question, because we actually do little Instagram posts of fashion. It struck me in April of the pandemic that I was missing being in closets and being in stores and looking at clothes. And I saved many, many years of fashion. So I started doing little stories about fashion and what you could take out of your closet and have your own little fashion show at your home. Right now, we're talking about moving more toward normalcy, or a version of normalcy. And I think what's come out of the pandemic was people, got into comfort and beyond anything we've ever experienced before. And melded with that was the sport element that has been so important in terms of the matching sweatsuit or the great sweat pant with a fabulous top. I mean, we laughed. I remember Jack Klugman years ago, his wife was on What's My Line or Password. And somebody said, well, your clothing budget must be so high. And he said, well, just tops. Because in those days, and that's kind of what the pandemic did, was most people were seen, from the shoulders up. So cute tops were also something that we focused on. I think now that we're emerging back into walking around and being with one another, I am a huge advocate for great jackets, because I think what jackets do is, if you put a great jacket with something casual on the bottom, it actually finishes the look. If you put it with something fancy, it completes the look. And the jackets I love right now are collarless and cropped, or I love the oversized boyfriend jacket, which is really coming out of the 80s and 90s. It can be belted, it's got larger shoulders, and you can roll up the sleeves and just throw it over. And many of us during COVID, I think, gained a few lbs eating all of those wonderfully comforting foods. And so those jackets do cover some of those little jiggles. So I absolutely love the idea of casual with a more structured piece, like a jacket, because I think jackets give polish jackets give a finishing, completed kind of feel. And I also think the tunic is going to be back in a very big way. The tunic coming out of sort of that wonderfully almost the world of anthropology, or Calypso in the old days, or Roberta Roller Rabbit, all of those beautiful tunics. I have some Tory Burch ones that are probably 25 years old, but those are also cut to fit through the waist, many of them, but then cover the hip and stomach area, where a lot of women don't want to have their stomach and hips exposed with a tight form. So, and they're also wonderfully decorative and colorful and easy to wear. So I think that we're going to hold on to comfort, but I also think we want a little more polish as we start to go back into social settings, even if they're smaller, even if they're a little bit more relaxed. I do think that women that love fashion always love fashion. And we don't want to feel like we're stuck in the rut of sameness. And I remember a story from Project Runway. There was a contestant that was having her 5th child. She was pregnant during the show. She was wearing little black dresses and stilettos every single show to do her work in the workroom. And Tim Gunn said to her, "Why are you wearing stilettos and these fabulous little dresses to work in the workroom? Everybody else was in very casual clothes." She said, "Listen, Tim, I have 4 kids." And she said, "It's a very slippery slope between this, a minivan, and sweatpants." And I think that it's just, we need to dig out from the pile of stretch fabrics and say, sure, we can keep the stretch and the comfort, but add a little something to it that finishes the look. And that's what I think spring and summer are going to be all about.
Wow, great. I love those stories, and I love those trend tips that I'm going to be, I think I actually am going to pull out some of my tunics for the summer. So I love that.
Girl, there we go. Perfect. Love it.
Well, I could just talk to you all day. This has been so much fun. This is one of my favorite interviews I've done in a long time. So thank you so much for your energy, for joining us, Deb. And we're so excited to share your story with our audience. So with that, thanks everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
For more information on this podcast, you can check out our podcast channel page at womeninretail.com/podcasts for show notes. Also, Women in Retail Talks is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. And please make sure to subscribe on our podcast channel page as well. Finally, if you've enjoyed this episode, please take a few moments to rate and review this podcast. So with that, until next time, this has been Women in Retail Talks.